welcome to Mentally Fit, the podcast discussing topics related to mental health and LGBTQ issues. I'm Kendra Fisher, Canadian hockey goalie, and if you're a new listener to the show, you can hear my previous episodes at WiSPSports.com, where you can also find the full transcripts on the show under Listen, and then just click on Mentally Fit. This show gives me the opportunity to share my experience with you and offer some advice on how to cope with mental illness. It's so important that you know you're not alone and that we have the tools to call on when we need them. I spend a lot of time now giving talks on these subjects, and on this episode, I'd like to share with you some of my information on alcohol and drug abuse, including prescription medication, as it pertains to mental health. I like to start this, obviously, with a little bit of definition around addictions and how it pertains to mental illness. And quite honestly, addictions is on the DSM for mental illness. It's not one or the other. It's often runs as a concurrent disorder. And I think that we have this, especially in the athletic world, we have this belief that we have to be able to maintain ourselves. We tend to not necessarily reach out when we need help, and instead we look for the things that we can use to get through on our own. And I think that that's probably, in my mind, again, relating to athletes especially, where we get into a lot of the self-medication. And when I say self-medication, I'm speaking about a lot of the behaviors around using alcohol and using drugs and prescription drugs to kind of maintain our sense of balance. And as always, I like to draw on my own experience. I feel as though I'm certainly capable and within my right to discuss what I know to be true based on what I've been through. My diagnosis, for those of you who haven't listened to this show before, I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, agoraphobia, OCD, panic disorder, and panic attacks at a young age, but not young enough. And when I actually was diagnosed, I was at rock bottom. I was in my late teens. I was just making Team Canada, and I was actually in a position where I was forced to quit Team Canada. But leading into that diagnosis, I went through a lot of process around getting diagnosed, and a lot of the symptoms that I was feeling, a lot of what I was going through, nobody could explain. Nobody could explain why all of a sudden getting to the rink to play hockey was that much more challenging, why being in a car was making me feel like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. And unfortunately, in our teenage years and in those transition years between high school and university especially, we tend to rely on what's in our environment to get us through. And I think that these are the age categories where we see a lot more people turning to, going out in the social environment and going out to party. And I found myself in the same situation. I found myself in a place where I was in a new city. I was by myself. And I had a lot more freedom to act how I wanted to act without necessarily having the direct supervision of having my parents around. And I got to a place where what began as a very social thing, what began as going out with my friends to party on occasion, it became something that I started to rely on. I started to feel the symptoms of mental illness a lot greater. And I started to realize that I could drown that out. I could drown that out if I had a few more drinks, and I could drown that out if I just kind of stayed in that state of I guess, oblivion. I guess I just got to a point where I was very much drinking to make those feelings go away. And it became an issue for me. It became an issue of I was drinking more and more on a daily basis, just trying to cope with those feelings so that I could maintain that image of an athlete. I could maintain that image of somebody who had it together and was strong and was capable. And it became so dependent for me as a tool that I didn't realize the harm I was causing myself. Skip forward a little bit, I get my diagnosis, and I'm explained the realities behind the effects that alcohol and drugs have on mental health and mental illness specifically. And I learned the really hard lesson that I may have been responsible for my much quicker decline to rock bottom simply by engaging in those behaviors. Alcohol is a depressant, and unequivocally, if you're dealing with issues that you feel as though you're not controlling your moods, or that you're feeling as though you need to be in an alternate state, what I learned and what I found out was that actually I was forcing myself further into that state. And I guess the cycle became one of, I believed that I needed that drink, I needed that feeling to escape it. And reality was, when I was coming back out of that influence, I would be worse than I was before. And it becomes such a dangerous cycle. And furthermore, less relevant to my story, but I'm not suggesting that I ever was without. I absolutely have tried marijuana as well, to self-medicate. And a lot of people speak about the use of marijuana and the use of substances along these lines to cope with anxiety, to cope with stress, to cope with those feelings of just being out of control. And we have this misconception that weed will just calm you right down. And yes, it's true for some people. And yes, there's a whole field of medicinal marijuana that I can't speak enough to because I'm not educated enough in it. And perhaps there are parts of it that can be useful with a doctor's supervision. But what I can tell you unequivocally is that it's been discovered and realized that marijuana has the ability to push somebody who's predisposed to living with mental illness into psychosis. It has the ability to trigger something in an individual that may never be triggered otherwise and put them into a state of psychosis. And that puts you into a realm of existence that you may never recover fully from. And your ability to come back from is going to be limited because you've now flipped a switch that has changed the composition of what's happening in your brain. And I feel like this is such an important topic because we are in a place right now where we are in crisis around drug use and mental illness. And when we think as well about all of the other facets around drug use that I have no time to go on about, but I mean, you look at the crisis around fentanyl and the crisis around opioids and people using these things to get through their days, and the severity of what these reactions are and what the overdose rates are getting to be at. I can only speak to Canada, unfortunately. I don't know the statistics down in the States. But I mean, in Canada right now, you can't get in your car and drive without being recommended to go to your local drugstore and pick up a kit to help somebody in case you come across somebody who's overdosed and fentanyl was present, because it's become such a crisis. And all in all, what I want to say to this is I very much understand the desire and the drive to rely on substances as a coping tool. But the education behind this and my experience behind this, which is education-based, is it doesn't work. No matter how much you feel as though you are bettering your situation or controlling these symptoms, you are in fact making it worse for yourself. And what I want to say to those people is, as hard as it is and as much of a struggle as it is, this is something else that we really need to reach out for help with, because it is not an effective coping mechanism. It's not an effective strategy. And in fact, you are going to come out of it worse, unequivocally, every single time. And I really, really want to urge people to take a step back and really learn the science behind alcoholism, the science behind drug use, and what it's actually doing to your body in order to numb those feelings that you feel as though you're coping with. And instead start reaching out for more productive and healthier ways to cope with what you're feeling. And on top of that, especially in the athletics world, again, coming back to this, we need to get a lot more acceptant in having people reach out and say, I'm not doing okay, which is extraordinarily difficult for somebody to do when they feel as though their livelihood or their ability to succeed in what it is they're doing is directly affected by saying, I'm not at my best. For an athlete, that means saying to a coach or saying to a therapist, I might not be at my best right now. And the fear then is the repercussion might be, you're not on the team anymore. You don't have the ability to succeed at this anymore. Whereas I challenge those coaches and I challenge the entire infrastructure of sport and organization to understand that we're willing to work with athletes on physical recovery. We're willing to work with an athlete who blows their knee. We're willing to work with an athlete who, breaks a leg. We need to be as willing to work with athletes who are struggling with drug use and struggling with coping tools in general, and help them find the healthy and the productive resources to cope with what it is they're going through mentally. And I assure you, I can attest to this, you're going to get your best version of any athlete out of somebody whose mental health and physical health are at their best. And we need to start treating them as one and the same. And I feel as though this is just something we need to talk about more because it's something that we privately rely on. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. Mental illness isn't something that we should be dealing with in private. It's something that we need to build a support team around us, and we need to be able to reach out and feel as though we have a safe environment to come from. And that means starting to eliminate these behaviors and these reliances that are just so unhealthy and detrimental to people. I guess that's kind of where I'm going to leave it at today. I know there's so much more we could discuss on this. And please, if you're looking for further information on any one of these, check out our information on social media. I'm happy to speak to anything that you question. You can check out my website, mentallyfit.com, for more information. As well, we have the resources to share your own experiences and conversations on the website and engage in conversations around this and find some of the tools to learn more. You can also follow Mentally Fit on Twitter at mentally_fit, on Instagram at mentallyfitmf, and you can find me on Facebook under Kendra Fisher, on Instagram at kfisher30, and on Twitter at Kendra_Fisher30. As well, please follow WiSP Sport on the social media channels. They're all at WiSP Sports. And for conversations from around the world of women's sports, including articles, videos, blogs, podcasts, make sure you visit the WiSPSports.com website. WiSP Sport Radio is the largest podcast network for women's sport in the world, with more than 700 episodes across 30 unique shows and a global audience of more than 1.5 million. You can listen on the website or subscribe to any podcast player such as iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play. As well, I'm going to be back next week with host Chris Stafford on WiSP Sports Live Daily Morning Show. I believe we're going to discuss a bit about the upcoming Winter Olympics. If you download Anchor, the Anchor app, you have the ability to call in, take part of the show. We'd love to have you join in on the conversation. Once again, I'm Kendra Fisher, and until next time, please take care of one another and just check in on those you love. Thank you.